My next surrounding claim is that woke ideology is anti-liberal and fascistic. My real point is, if you want to brand everybody fascist, you can't behave like fascists yourself.
But the key difference is fascism uses the power of the state to impose their
So
opinions.
does the woke left.
Wokeism does not.
Oh, it does.
Was anybody deported for being woke during the Biden administration?
Here's my answer.
Does anybody get rounded up in the streets for their opinion? Did anybody get canceled because the FCC said you're being too woke? No, that doesn't happen.
Can I answer?
Of course.
Of course. Actually, the woke left have deployed the power of the state many times. Look at the pandemic. Look at the pandemic.
How is that wokeism?
I'll tell you how it's
Wait,
wokeism.
so diseases are woke now?
Okay, this Piers Morgan is a fucking moron.
I'm a little late to the party, but Piers Morgan decides to debate his worst enemy, woke liberals. I do not like Piers Morgan. I think he is an individual that allows the people on the right, especially the far right, to have a more moderate voice than it actually does, as he proposes himself as a centrist, as a moderate, someone with reasonable takes, but at the same time consistently criticizes the left, always argues for the right, and admits that he's friends with Donald Trump. There's no way you can admit or you can claim that you're a moderate in this political landscape. So I think this will be an interesting contrast, considering Piers Morgan debated Tucker Carlson and was all laughing and giggling, having a good old time, whilst Tucker Carlson tries his hardest to argue for a white England and argue England shouldn't have gotten involved. How will he act now? Let's find out.
The wokies are around me. Stop talking, Parker.
Is literally participation trophy.
My first surrounded claim is that masculinity has never been toxic.
I'm not interested in this conversation. Masculinity never being toxic is a ridiculous statement to make. This sounds like a content question or content statement. There's no way you can say certain ways that men treated women and men treated kids, and men were not able to express themselves emotionally, creating this very, dare I say, authoritarian, emotionless dynamic consistently in households. There's no way you can say that's not toxic. So I'm gonna assume that was a question purely for content and clicks and move on. I don't believe that's a real statement. This is what we're here to talk about.
My next surrounding claim is that woke ideology is anti-liberal and fascistic.
Okay. This is interesting. I'll be able to be decently nuanced behind this statement because I have criticisms with wokies, but obviously Piers Morgan is very disingenuous that I see. So let's do it.
How's it going?
How are you?
Good to meet you. My name is Evan.
Evan?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Evan.
My issue with this claim is I find associating wokeism with fascism to be quite ironic. Wokeism to me is a term that's used, a shorthand pejorative term that's used to describe left-wing cultural politics. And I think the term wokeism and people on the right often use it as a means to deflect and distract from class politics. And there's a very key example of this. So the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, this was something that you actually celebrated quite a bit when it initially came into office. Elon Musk was coming in to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Obviously, they found 0 instances of fraud. To the extent they found waste, it was just stuff that they ideologically disagreed with. And there were all these programs they were cutting, for example, like LGBTQ programs in Latin America, et cetera. And we were celebrating this all as a big victory. But this was all a distraction because what the agency was actually doing was destroying the National Labor Relations Board, a board that is designed to protect workers' abilities to unionize.
Before we continue, I do think it's appropriate to distinguish certain things. I don't think this is the right mic. Let me change this mic.
All right, this should be the right mic. Good thing I noticed before it got nasty. There's very important things to distinguish that I'm sure Piers Morgan doesn't care about. Wokeism, shout out Wikipedia, is something that was coined initially from African Americans, from Black people. And the idea is to look beyond the current way society has portrayed Black people. The idea of being woke is a simple idea that Piers Morgan, I'm sure, would understand if he was having a conversation in good faith. If a society is prejudiced, it's racist, it's problematic, it is completely ostracizing and discriminating against a very specific section of people, the people need to wake up. Realize that this is problematic. Realize that this is not how society should be. That's all it is. Waking up from violations of human dignity. Now, I know that's not how Piers Morgan is using the term, and I completely understand that terminology shifts based off current cultural climates. But the woke ideology, saying that it's anti-liberal and fascistic, when he went against these same problems that he would agree with, considering he went out of his way to call out that racist white woman on his panel, I think it's a little flawed. But I think that was at the very least something very interesting to sparse out. Let's continue.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a bureau that is meant to protect consumers from billionaire capitalists like Elon Musk. These institutions, along with the IRS, all of these institutions meant to actually protect and put a check on capitalist billionaires like Elon Musk and the consolidation of fascistic power in our state. All of that was being distracted by this term wokeism. And I think that like when you obsess over things like trans people in sports or DEI policies and XYZ, it is a deliberate means to distract from these very real issues.
Really?
Yes, 100%.
Well, let's take what you just mentioned, trans athletes in sports. Do you think it's a good idea?
Not necessarily. I mean, so it depends on which sport and it depends on which
sport.
But notice what you're doing right now, right?
You mentioned it. I didn't mention it.
Well, what I mentioned is that these are all a means to distract from very real issues. Can you at least acknowledge that you did celebrate Doge despite it rooting out all these institutions that actually impact Americans?
I'll answer you. Sure. I thought the cutting government waste was a good thing.
Sure.
Do I think it was well executed? Not particularly. You've got to let me finish.
Go for it.
Do I think it was well executed? Not particularly. Elon left pretty quickly and the government just carried on spending a ton of money. Do I think some of the things they cut were wrong? Yes, I agree with you. Do I think all of them? No, I think they did find examples of waste. So, if you had a proper, consistent, ongoing.
In terms of waste, the only thing that people could argue, which is more of a political identifier of differences of values, is when they cut certain things that involved research that are more left-wing things or climate change things. These are not things that are wasteful. The only thing that I would probably always be down for is that there are certain positions that probably can get cut and then updated with technology. At the same time, I do think you need to replace those jobs in other areas so people still have a career, or at the very least raise wages to compensate that differences of loss of occupation. There's ways to do efficiency properly. There's no evidence Elon Musk did any of them.
Doge mentality, which cut genuine things which we all can agree are probably a bit wasteful, I'd be all for it. Do I support everything they cut? No, I don't. But given you mentioned the trans thing, because I hear a lot from the woke left, and I try and say to them, look, if you want to know why Donald Trump got reelected, your worst nightmare coming true, and you all sit there on election day thinking, how on earth has this happened? Well, one of the reasons was he just stood there. You can shake your head, but one of the reasons is he stood there and went, under me, if I get elected, then I am going to ban trans athletes from women's sport.
Yeah. Well,
no.
Wait, can I just respond?
No. I'm going to add one thing to it. Then you can respond. If you remember, Kamala Harris endorsed it, thought it was a good idea. So the first potential female president of the United States thought it was fair and equitable and safe that biological males compete in women's sport. Trump understood that most people in America, most people around the world, outside of the woke left, do not agree with that. And there's a reason we don't agree with it. Let me finish. The Olympics are coming here. Right, to Los Angeles.
And you're also wrong about Iman Khalif, by the way. Yeah.
Well, I'm not wrong about Iman Khalif. Well, Iman Khalif was banned from the World Championships. She's an Algerian boxer, banned from the World Championships because of testing positive for male chromosomes. Right?
That's not true.
Well, it is true.
No, so
you may not want to believe it, but it is true.
So the international.
Let's be very clear. One of the reasons that Donald Trump got elected was in part due to the misinformation regarding the trans conversation. It's a marginal issue that I do think, at the very least, you can argue that messaging on the left should have been a little bit more concrete, that they did not support certain things, but these people should be treated as human beings. Let's be very clear about this. Democrats just wanted to treat trans people like the humans that they are because they are humans. Does it go too far on the far left? I agree to that. But ultimately, the right has co-opted the messaging and made the far left points that were made that were a little bit more radical the entire premise behind the Democrat Party. They knew that they could manipulate the masses with commercials about the jail stuff that happened with like Kamala Harris like years ago and make it seem that they just want trans people everywhere. That's not a reality. That was not substantiated throughout their administration. This was just a conversation piece to manipulate people who found a demon that they wanted to exercise. Simple as that. That doesn't make woke ideology anti-liberal or fascistic. Actually, it makes it more liberal because they wanted human rights and human dignity for trans people. And definitely not fascistic because there's no governmental power or authoritarian backing behind this ideology.
National Olympic Committee said that Iman Khalif was both born female. She has a female passport. Algeria, you think Algeria, the state of Algeria, recognizes trans identity? Really, Piers? Like, let's be honest with ourselves. The only institution, the institution that claimed that she failed an unspecified gender or sex identity test was some Russian-backed organization that is not internationally recognized by the International Olympic Committee. But wait, no. Let me reset.
You can't say something and me not challenge you back if you're wrong.
But that's exactly what you did earlier. I just need to quickly get into.
All Iman Khalif has to do.
So it's interesting. All these fact checks are stating the ridiculous nature of Piers Morgan's lack of accountability, especially considering this has been debunked months ago. But he's still holding on to this as a means to reinforce a very shallow point about trans people being the root of all evil. You can criticize a premise and philosophical difference in terms of how far trans people should be integrated into society without making up information just to prove your hatred for a group of people. Come on, Piers. Do better.
Is take a sex test.
Sure, okay.
They're now bringing the sex test in. Then there's no problem. Why do you think Iman Khalif is not?
I don't want you to distract from the fact that the election, there is no evidence that people voted based on their opinions on trans identity.
Let me give it to you.
In a Gallup 2024
there is
poll,
no evidence.
In a Gallup 2024 poll, post-election, out of 22 issues, trans issues ranked 22 out of 22.
Can I respond?
In every election in all OECD countries across the world, inflation and the economy. Yes, but I just let you go on.
No, let me just respond to you.
Sure.
Actually, if you read the New York Times the week after the election,
I did read the New York Times.
Then you will remember a deep dive they did into it. Wait a minute, that's talking. You want to talk all the time.
Sorry.
Show me some respect.
Sorry.
There was a New York Times report into a particular commercial ad, campaign ad that the Trump side put out, and they originally started it in a few sports arenas. They got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the ad was basically a 30-second mashup of Kamala Harris endorsing trans athletes in women's sport and in women's spaces and so on and so on. And it ended with Kamala is for they them. Donald Trump is for you. The New York Times said that they believe that moved the needle, they're reporting, by as much as 3 points.
Based on what information?
Ask the New York Times.
No, that's not. You understand news agencies aren't conducting polling analysis. That same article.
The point of arguing against this on the liberal side is honestly pointless. I just don't see what the point is to deteriorate the claims that were falsified, but definitely real as a means to reinforce a very clear narrative against trans people on the right. That exists, regardless of what polling says, or that exists. The narratives that are brought up, the talking points that are consistently perpetuated, the way that they act on social media. Sometimes you don't need something substantive like a poll, which is only a articulation of a subsection of people who actually participate in these polls. So I think it's fine, my guy. I think it's okay to see the point that trans issues was a factor. Then follow up saying, but it wasn't the most important one. You have 21 other issues that were far more important. Just bring that up, and then you've been fine. And the way you could have argued this very cleanly is go like, oh yeah, people cared about this, but it wasn't a very serious issue. We seen in one of the recent special elections where someone tried to run on trans stuff, he got completely demolished against a Democrat. The people, what they care about the economy. They didn't care about improving their lives. That's what's far more important than this fringe trans issue. This woke ideology is anti-liberal and fascistic. Considering that this is a fringe issue, considering there's no substantive way that these are being implemented into politics, Piers has yet to prove any point.
Cited the Gallup poll
Evan,
that I just identified
yes,
where trans issues ranked
but they said it
22 out of
moved
22.
one ad moved the needle by 3 points.
And based on what information? If you poll people on what issues that they cared about in the 2024 election,
So you don't
all
think-
of it was centered around economy and inflation.
Okay.
And this is just obvious because
I have to move past this guy.
Good to see you. How are you?
Good to meet you, Piers.
Good to meet you. What's your name?
I promise, Mason.
Mason.
I do not mean this as an insult.
No, please.
You
fire
seem
away.
way more comforting in person. Like you look taller on your show. Like, and you have this like very
I'm
like.
6'1". What are you talking about?
I don't.
Well,
When I
I'm
saw you
small
walk
to
in,
you.
when I saw you walk in, I don't know. Maybe you just look like a giant on your show.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah.
I don't know how to take that, but I'll take it as a
Yeah,
compliment.
yeah. So I really want to make sure that we get our definitions correct first.
Yes.
When you say that wokeism equals fascism, would
Yes.
you say that's like the claim diluted into like a small?
Let me explain what I mean by that. Okay, and I've talked about this a lot in my book, Woke is Dead. And again, just to remind you, I come at this as a pissed off liberal who has nothing in common with the woke left and wants the woke left to actually come back to a more commonsensical, electable position, actually. And here's what I think about what wokeism became. It began in the 60s in Black American music. In its origin, a great thing. It was about raising awareness to social and racial injustice. By that criteria, I'm happy to say I'm woke. But that's not
We already defined that. I'm glad he understands the difference.
what's happened in the last few years. In the last few years, for a combination of reasons, one of which the pandemic sent everybody nuts. Everyone was at home drinking too much on the internet, firing off all their ridiculous views and just got into rabbit holes and so on. But we can leave that. But wokeism is supposed to be a celebration. I would think, agree.
Yeah,
Well,
I think-
hang on. It's
But
supposed to be
Piers,
hang
you're
on.
the person in the
Let me
center.
finish.
Can I talk
Let
a
me
little bit on my 3
I-
minutes I get before I'm voted out?
I haven't made my point.
Okay.
Do you agree that it's supposed to be about liberalism, about being a liberal?
I would say that the idea of wokeism is kind of an evolution from a bunch of different terms that have been used to
But
throw
at
out the
its
left
heart, should it be
specifically.
a
So
celebration
like
of
before
liberalism?
wokeism, it was critical race theory. Before critical race theory, it was social justice.
Right.
There's a lot that the right specifically, and I
Would
know
you
you say that
agree-
you're not the right,
does it celebrate-
but it's a reactionary.
celebrate
It's a
liberalism?
reactionary response towards the elevation of certain groups that has historically been silenced.
But does it celebrate liberalism?
I don't think so. I don't think it has to. I think
The
a
reason
lot of
I'm
it also
asking-
has to talk about
the reason
class
I'm-
solidarity,
let me
which
give it-
typically is
Let me give you a
illiberal.
little Latin lesson, because the Latin was liber, meaning free, and also the root of liberty, meaning the quality or state of being free, and liberalis, meaning courteous, generous, gentlemanly.
I love these definitions.
Wait a
Can
minute.
Can you describe?
You asked for a
but
definition.
Can you describe
I'm giving you
fascism?
one.
That's
Yes.
really what I want to talk about.
I know what fascism is.
Wait, what is it then? Because enlighten me.
Something that the people on the left, when they are debating or engaging, especially the younger individuals, you guys know your facts. There's no doubt about it that you guys know how to dive into facts, articulate what those facts are, and bend them into, or at the very least, articulate them into what the reality of what society is actually doing and what is actually going on. However, in terms of a debate and a general conversation, these facts are relatively meaningless if there's no way to kind of connect them to a way of reality that is understandable to the masses. The reason why I bring this up is that there's just certain things that you can agree to, secede, as well as use that secession to develop a further point. This guy is very smart. I've seen them a couple different times. He's not extremely, but he's definitely a progressive. In this circumstance, it would have been extremely easy to say, is woke liberal? You don't have to be in debate mode. The idea of wokeism is adhering to the fact that liberal rights are not being truly perpetuated to all of the people that live in America, at the very least in the circumstance that we're referring to, right? Use that definition, apply that to trans people, and then dive into the conversation on whether or not Piers believes trans people deserve rights. It's a very quick and very simple step-by-step process. You don't have to battle against each point to ensure that you have control of the conversation. The conversation's free-flowing. It develops itself, but really there's a substance behind the points that are being made. That's where all the meat is. That's the juice. That's that nectar. That's that coconut milk.
Can I finish telling you what liberalism is?
No, I know what liberalism is.
Well, you don't think you do.
Yeah,
Because
it
if you're
is.
a woke left, they don't understand what being a liberal
No,
actually
no, no.
means.
What being
I do.
What being a
I
liberal.
do. So let me explain to you. The definition of a liberal include one who is open-minded or not strict in the observance of orthodox, traditional, or established forms or ways. A person who is willing to respect or accept behavior or opinions different from one's own, favorable to or respectful of individual rights and freedoms, and concerned with broadening general knowledge and experience. Now, what part of that do you think the woke left have adhered to in the last 5 years?
But I need to know,
what the
why
woke-
is it fascism?
I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
So the woke left have basically said, we hate fascists, we hate Nazis. In fact, we think everyone we don't agree with is a fascist and a Nazi. Led by Donald
That's
Trump,
an insane
led by everyone who
generalization.
voted for Trump, led by Charlie Kirk, led by all these people.
Can I tell you what
Wait,
I
let me
represent?
finish my point, then
Okay.
you can respond. That they're all a bunch of fascists, they're all a bunch of Nazis. And I kept warning the woke left, as a pissed off liberal, stop over-demonizing people by using the word Nazi and Hitler and fascist. It is ridiculously self-harming to yourselves, and it leads actually to young deranged minds like the assassin of Charlie Kirk to actually put anti-fascism slogans.
I'm gonna allow this conversation to perpetuate, but there's a very quick and simple way to respond to this for this guy over here, because all you have to do is bring a mirror that fits Piers Morgan's fat ass head, and you'll be able to see the hypocrisy right in front of you. So bring up the mirror, make sure it shines really well on that shiny forehead. Look at that shiny forehead. Look at that shiny forehead.
On their bullets and to murder people for their speech, right? So wokeism, in the end, in the last few years, transformed from what was supposed to be a celebration of liberalism in many ways into a form of fascism. Why do I say that? Because it conditions people that you either adhere to our narrow worldview, and if you don't, we're going to shame you, vilify you.
Look, all the
destroy
flags are up.
you.
I didn't even get to
We're gonna-
talk, Piers.
we're gonna
Let me
ca- I'm
talk.
going to let you respond.
I'm going to lose my time.
Cancel you, or in some circumstances, we're going to kill you for your free speech and opinions.
Okay.
And that is where it became, in my opinion, a very dangerous,
But it just sounds like
very
you're,
deluded
it sounds like you're trying
form
to.
of fascism.
It sounds like you're
which
trying
is
to.
ironic because wokies say they hate the fascists.
It sounds like you're trying to correlate fascism with authoritarianism, which is control of speech or control of how people interact or control of behavior.
Fascists do control speech.
Right, that can be a part of it, is the
And they do kill
authoritarianism.
you for your
But the
views.
specific part of fascism is specifically trying to preserve a hierarchy based on either shared ethnicity or shared culture.
Mhm.
That is the idea of elevating
But the
one
woke left
specific
are their
group
own culture.
into the top. No,
Yes, you are.
So you're telling me that Hitler would have been wearing a BLM shirt, or Hitler would have been
No,
wearing
of
an
course he
anti?
wouldn't.
Because wokeism is not fascism. Fascism is specifically dealing with one particular
what-
group.
but-
They're elevating to the
but
top of the
people
hierarchy.
who identify
That's what we
as
saw.
woke
That's what we
behave-
saw in fascist
they
Italy.
behave
That's what we saw in Nazi
they
Germany.
behave
That's
like
what we saw
fascists.
in Imperial Japan.
But Mason, do you not-
None of that correlates with the elevation of particular groups that have historically been silenced, which is the idea of what progressivism is.
I hear you.
I reject the idea of wokeness just because wokeness, again, is used as that insult that
I
is
think,
elevated from
honestly,
different insults that have been thrown in the past.
Respectfully, I think wokeism has become one of the worst scourges in the world.
Yeah, because I
I
think
think
that
it's
there's been a
become-
successful campaign to basically
led
attach.
by the woke left.
No, it has been to attach all of these pejoratives to a idea of emancipation from silenced groups. That's the idea. The
There's
idea
nothing
that
silent about
yes,
the
the
woke
idea
left.
that we should bring
You never
people to
stop
the table.
yapping, any
That
of you.
no,
Ever.
the-
You never stop.
that's why I hear
howling.
so much about cancel culture, about how
you
everybody's
know
getting
the best-
canceled
the
when they're
best-
millionaires with podcasts that talk about this shit every day.
The best quote I have in my book.
Piers Morgan's very effective. I mean, are you surprised? He has a whole talk show. He has been doing media and arguing for a very, very long time. What Piers Morgan is trying to do is muddy the waters, but you really have to get into specifics, very clear specifics. Because fascism requires a certain level of authority, as well as the understanding that there is a want of a dominant culture that takes precedent over the entire nation. In this retrospect, the idea of people who are woke is not trying to create a whole society, a utopian society behind very fringes that he's basically hateful for, regarding trans people, regarding I don't know what else he was going to regard. He doesn't want all people to be woke. He just wants to protect the people that are getting attacked. It's a response. The reason why these people popped up, regardless if you dislike them or not, I dislike them because we're playing a game, right? That there is a chain of events, a causal reality that turned the society upside down as it is today. There was a society that denied the existence of trans people. There was a society where when it comes down to being trans, it was ridiculous. It was weird, right? There are certain sections, very, very, very marginalized, that weren't treated with respect as equals. Now, in modern society, it's normal to be trans. The thing is, I do think it has went too far. There is a fear of people that you can't say certain things because you feel like you're going to offend someone. That is fair. That is fine. But you have to recognize that it was a reaction for people who truly are suffering under gender dysphoria, who are outcasted by society, who have nowhere to belong, and just want to be heard. It's not fascistic, but that is a level of kind of revolution, small scale revolution to an ostracization of the majority. With that said, the difference is that the anti-woke movement or the anti-trans movement or the anti-DEI movement, they just want to remove these people from power altogether. If you're going to broad brush woke ideology, you have to broad brush the other kind of fascistic ideologies that have very clearly made it their intent of wanting a nation that is Christian, that is white, that is pure-blooded American. That same type of philosophy just does not apply to the wokes, regardless of the criticism. There's a way to navigate this conversation that was much more effective. I just don't think this was. I'm no longer interested in this conversation. Unless this guy, he had some time. Let's see how he navigates it. We'll see. Let's do it.
Way too smart to believe
wait
this.
a
Cancel because the FCC.
it would be the
Look, I'm not
destruction.
advocating for
No, I'm just saying it would
completely
be the,
gender
it
neutral
would be the
sports.
destruction of women's sport. That's why we separate the sexes, and that's why the issue matters. Sorry, lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Excellent, nice suit.
Great to meet you,
What's
sir.
your name?
Nick. Great
Nick,
to
nice
meet
to
you.
meet you.
So look, the prompt was about the equivalency between wokeism and fascism. The key difference.
Well, to be clear, the prompt actually, my real point is, if you want to brand everybody fascist, you can't behave like fascists yourself.
But the key difference is fascism uses the power of the state to impose their
so
opinions.
does the woke left.
Wokeism does not.
Oh, it does.
Was anybody deported for being woke during the Biden administration?
Here's my answer.
Does anybody get rounded up in the streets for their opinion? Did anybody get canceled because the FCC said you're being too woke?
Can I
that doesn't happen.
Can I answer?
Of course.
Of course. Actually, the woke left have deployed the power of the state many times. Look at the pandemic. Look at the pandemic.
How is that wokeism?
I'll tell you how it's
Wait,
wokeism.
so diseases are woke now?
No, wokeism is where you take things which are not actually science-based, for example, the efficacy of masks, right? And by the way, I felt guilty of this myself. I'm not.
Okay, this Piers Morgan is a fucking moron. We have finally reached something to talk about because the other things kind of fell into definitions and fell into the trap of the narratives that Piers Morgan wants to shape. But this is what you had to do. Get into what the substance of what fascism really is. As I explained, as this gentleman has articulated, you need power, you need state, you need to be a part of the government. So now Piers Morgan had to shift his whole argument. He had to remove himself from individual narratives and try to apply an overarching point to something ridiculous. COVID lockdowns was wokeism? There's no correlation you can make that in comparison to the trans stuff or the DEI stuff. And there's actually good evidence on the validity of parts of the protections of DEI and parts of the protections of the trans movement. As for COVID, there's no science-based. The science was people's lives. It was a defensive measure to ensure that people are not spreading germs. Was it the perfect solution? No. But it wasn't a wokest solution. There wasn't anything woke about that. They didn't want to do that because I don't even know how this kind of falls in line with your definition. There was nothing where there's nothing. I'm trying to attach something. It's so ridiculous. It makes no sense. I can't even attach sense to the idea of comparing wokeism to COVID. Let's continue.
Saying I'm whiter than white about
So
this.
masks are woke.
No, they can be. If the woke mentality,
Yeah, Donald Trump, president.
I'll explain why. When a
Donald
government
Trump was
says
woke.
that if you're seen without a mask during a pandemic, you can be fined or punished.
Pierce, you're way
Wait a
too
minute,
smart to
wait
believe
Wait a
this.
minute. I'm giving you the argument, which I ended up accepting, right? Which is in a fast-moving pandemic, when the scientific advice changes so rapidly, I fell victim to this myself. I was very censorious of people. But you can't deny that the state had a mindset of you will conform or we will punish you. And it turned out they were making people.
This is so stupid. It's beyond stupid. Piers Morgan. I don't know what to say about this. I'm just gonna allow it to continue. Let Piers Morgan dig his hole for this fucking idiotic comparison.
People,
Simply
they were
not
making-
true.
It is true.
You may have felt
They were
uncomfortable
they
being
were
unmasked in public because people would say, "Hey,
I
be
didn't.
courteous
I
to other
did.
people."
I didn't.
Nobody got fired.
I didn't.
Nobody lost their job. Nobody
Actually, people
got
did get
exiled.
fired. They did lose
No,
their jobs.
all that stuff got
Yes.
overturned.
No, they
because
did.
we are a nation of laws.
People did get fired. They all lost their jobs for not wearing a mask. They were told they couldn't come to work.
Who?
Thousands of people.
Okay, so these
be
nebulous
clear,
people lost their
Nick,
jobs.
to be clear, you don't think anybody lost their job in the pandemic for refusing to wear a mask or refusing to be vaccinated?
I think that people who were
They
in
were
public-facing
state-authorized
situations where they could have
mandates.
easily taken a scientifically proven preemptive
It wasn't
measure.
proven.
Yes, it was.
No, it turned out not to be proven. That's my point. And yet the state, driven by a
Dude,
left-wing
again,
Democrat president,
So me
ordered
telling
It was a preemptive measure based on the understanding of limiting germ spreading, right? Just like how they didn't do a very hypothesis and then a test and then create a conclusion and create a scientific theory about washing your hands, having hand sanitizer, being hygienic. Why are you hygienic? Well, you're hygienic to prevent the transfer of germs. Why did you put on the mask? The philosophy behind that is to ensure that you're preventing the stuff that comes out of here, from going over there. That's why. It wasn't a foolproof plan, but they were trying anything to prevent this. But you and so many others whine and bitch like fucking babies about, oh my God, I have to put on a mask for a little while I move around in a pandemic that is killing millions. Woe is me, woe is me, woe is me. This is ridiculous. I didn't realize Piers Morgan was such a fucking idiot. I guess he's getting a little dementia. He has Joe Biden syndrome, getting old. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
that you are spreading misinformation. That is not fascism. That is just me telling you you're wrong.
No, you're not telling me I'm wrong because I'm right.
Okay, no, you're just not. And we're not going to relitigate COVID. That's now years ago at this point. The key point is it fascism? It is not fascism. You gave your very long definition of liberalism. Wokeism is about everything on that list that you described as being liberal.
Really?
It's about standing up for other perspectives.
think
it's
it's about
listening to other people that have not traditionally been listened to.
Oh, you don't listen to anybody.
Yes,
What are you
we
talking
do.
about? Of course you don't.
You said yourself, wokeism started about just acknowledging social problems. I think it's woke
That's
that
originally-
middle America's
yes.
jobs have been shipped overseas. That's woke to
Yeah.
recognize that there's larger social problems.
I don't dispute.
Police brutality,
Yes.
recognizing that there's a problem with the institution of policing.
Hmm.
That's woke. It's not fascist.
Would you defund the police?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, well, that's woke.
Not defunding the police is woke.
Calling for the police to be defunded is one of the worst things the woke.
This is just a semantic argument. Piers Morgan just has an issue with the far left. He's too simple-minded to understand that you can spark the idea of woke ideology for people who are much more rational than people who just want the destructive of the state. To be honest, you can call people on the right woke if you really want to. There's people on the right who actually have state power that have implemented this wokeist ideology. Yeah, Piers Morgan is his perception of this is so simplistic. It's funny. Let's move on. I'm bored. Gender neutral pronouns are pointless. I really don't give two shits about gender neutral pronouns. I don't care about pronouns at all, actually. I don't give a fuck. Let's go and continue. Cancel culture is real and a serious threat to free speech. Cancel culture? Like, are these issues in 2025? It dawns on me that Piers Morgan's still bitching like a little wuss about these things that nobody really cares about right now when Donald Trump is destroying the United States of America and by extension completely shifting the power balance of the entire world. But yeah, I can't say the N-word on the internet. Woe is me. I don't give a fuck. Let's continue. Is there anything else worth listening to? Are we going to go back to woke politics? Because I don't give a fuck about this. Actually, all right.
surrounded claim is that discussions of woke politics are merely a distraction from our common enemy, the billionaire class. So, as
I'm glad this guy's up. He didn't let Piers Morgan filibuster into nonsense.
I just said, I think that these discussions of woke, whether we're saying that the problems in society are because of broke graduate students or people that are being mean to us on Twitter, ultimately it's all secondary to what really unites us. I think that it's woke to talk about the fact that the middle America, the industrial heartland of Britain have been hollowed out by forces of globalization, outsourcing jobs to places like China or India or Malaysia or Vietnam, and that these talking about trans athletes, talking about what people choose to identify themselves as, it's all so unimportant. And 80, 90, 95% of what actually matters is what's going to put more money in people's pockets, what's going to let them have a dignified life for them and their family. And talking about wokeness, whether it's dead or alive, it's just a distraction, and it's really not important or relevant to most of our lives 95% of the time.
Okay, I think you can. The first part I agreed with about the globalization. I think it's spot on. And also, I'm not trying to claim that the wokeism, cultural war issues are more important than globalization or the impact, as you say, of nefarious billionaires around the world having too much power and money, with the disparity between them and the poorest parts of society getting bigger and bigger. I have very strong views about that. Nor am I trying to say that the debate about pronouns is in any way as significant as a debate I have all the time about the war in Gaza or the war in Ukraine. I just think you can have all these debates at the same time. And to pretend, as the woke left do, that none of these cultural wars cut through or matter is to be completely deluded. And I would simply say to you, there was a UN report came out, and it said, I think it was 2024, nearly 900 medals in competitive women's sport, to come back to that issue we discussed, had been deprived from actual women because trans athletes had won them. That's a staggeringly large number of girls and women who've been deprived of their right.
That's an interesting number. I don't believe it, so I'm gonna have to look that up. 2024 UN trans women medals over, I guess, cis women. I don't use that terminology, but I need to make sure I'm getting the right data. I need to find a source I trust. I don't trust right-wing sources. Okay. Let me go to this source. So this is the source. Now I want to find the specific report. That's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to see where they what do you call it? They source it? Is that what you call it? Where's the source that you're referring to? I don't know how you, as a mainstream article, I don't know how you do not source your claims. Okay. Violent. Welcome to the United Nations. All right. I found it. Violence against women and girls, its causes and consequences noted by the Secretary General. Report of the Special Rapporteur on Violence against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences. Interesting. Let's can get right into business. Medals. Policies implemented by international federations and national governing bodies, along with national legislation in some countries, allow males who identify as women to compete in female sports categories. In other cases, this practice is not explicitly prohibited and is thus tolerated in practice. Replacement of the female sports category with the mixed sex category has resulted in an increasing number of female athletes losing opportunities, including medals. When competing against males, including medals when competing against males. According to information received by March 30th, 2024, over 600 female athletes in more than 400 competitions have lost more than 890 medals in 29 different sports. So this is a true statement. Oh. Interesting. My opinion is no. I don't agree with that. I've said I don't agree with that before. So I think that's fine. Still a fringe issue, but definitely something that probably should not be allowed at a certain level. I think the separation is necessary. With that said, my issue with Piers Morgan here is not that he cares about women's sports, and I question that. It's more so his focus on this conversation. You can raise awareness for a topic that is fringe, but is still important. Like a topic that I care about, that I want to talk about more is obviously the public education system and how it should be re-implemented in a way that's much more efficient. However, that's just not something that people are having on a general conversation about. Matter of fact, we're going the opposite direction and destroying actual ways to increase efficiency of education. Nonetheless, for a situation like this, you can raise awareness, you can have issues, that's perfectly fine. And then there's a lot of people who are, dare I say, woke, dare I say, liberal, much more leaning in like the majority left, the majority center left, especially, that also agree with your sentiment. However, the point of the claim that he's making here is that you, Piers Morgan, spend so much of your time talking about this fringe issue that not many people disagree with in the totality of people discussing politics. You spend so much of your time making it a bigger issue than it actually is, that yes, therefore you are distracting from the big conversation of wealth inequality. I mean, you're one of the biggest Donald Trump dick suckers and friends of billionaires in the world right now. So you're doing exactly what he's claiming. You talk about fringe issues that don't fucking matter, and then you do your best to defend the people with power and money. Unless you don't like them and it's from your own country. Shout out the royalty.
Rightful medal competing in women's sport because of the altar of trans activism driven by the woke
See, this is my trouble, Pierce, with talking about trans athletes, because functionally you're talking about 900 medals given out to people. I don't
Not
know
enough
this
for you?
figure. My thing is that an
If they were-
8-year-old
if-
winning a track and field meet doesn't really affect me.
What about Riley Gaines?
California
What about Riley
just-
Gaines, who's written the campaign? Well, what about Riley Gaines? I mean, why should Leah Thomas?
This is exactly my point,
No, but
Pierce. This whole discussion of trans athletes has nothing to do with what actually matters to people's
I
lives.
don't agree with you.
You're
though.
talking about it
With all
because
due
it
respect,
gets a lot of clicks,
no,
gets a lot of
I
viewers,
don't agree
sells
with
books,
you. I don't agree with you.
and these other issues are much more
I know.
important. But
You know who leads that campaign of saying no one cares? The woke left. Most of whom think it's absolutely fine. Most of whom think someone like Riley Gaines
again,
is the enemy.
see-
Riley Gaines is the enemy. If you've seen the Pablo Torre video, I highly recommend it, where Riley Gaines literally lied about most of the things regarding Leah Thomas and was getting millions of dollars from the right to do this smear campaign. Riley Gaines is not a good person. But Piers Morgan doesn't care about that because, again, he lies for those same billionaires that was putting money in Riley Gaines' pockets. Be very clear about that.
this is
For
the
standing
problem,
up for
Pierce,
women's rights.
is you're saying that we have time to debate all of these issues.
Nah.
But practically, we know that society prioritizes different issues.
How much time do you think I spent on the Israel-Hamas war compared to wokeism in the last calendar year?
A lot of time has been spent on the Israel-Gaza
Give me
war.
a percentage.
A lot of people have died.
Give me a percentage of how much time
I
I
don't-
personally devoted to one.
I'm not sitting here
and
with
the
a
other.
stopwatch.
Piers Morgan, you want a medal? You want a medal? You want me to take it away from a woman and put it in your hands? How about bronze? Bronze might be good enough with your fat ass. Let's be very clear, Piers Morgan. Just because you bring up Israel, Palestine, or Ukraine, Russia, doesn't mean jack shit to me. Because we're talking about the billionaire class. We're not talking about international conflicts. Especially considering you know that these conflicts do something very specific. They put money in your pockets because they are trending issues. Is that all you talk about? Trending issues and trans issues? The double T's? Piers Morgan, let's be clear. Talking about the billion class is talking about the wealth inequality that's been going on for years. Talking about the decreasing middle class. Talk about how people are losing their homes. Talk about how the economy is worsening because of tariffs. Talk about how I know why you don't want to talk about that stuff, Piers Morgan. Because your friend, your best friend, Donald Trump, he's in office. He's doing this stuff. MAGA's doing this stuff. Your buddies are doing this stuff. So, of course, you don't want to talk about that. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help you become richer. You want to be part of the billionaire class. Piers Morgan, congratulations.
Going how
Let
much
me help
time is
you.
spent on
Let
one,
me
but I
help
know
you.
it's not
Let
nearly
me
enough
help
time
you.
is being
Let me
spent
help
on
you. I spend a
homelessness,
lot.
poverty.
Fine.
These are the issues that really matter.
There are a million issues. You may not care about the trans athlete issue. I can tell you millions of people do. Who are you, all due respect, to have the arrogance to tell people what they should be caring about? You can compare, you can
I'm not trying to tell them not to care about it. I don't think it should be at the top or even in the top 10 of the issues they actually are talking
That's
about.
entirely your prerogative. But you should not be arrogant enough to assume you know what people care about. I know from the work I did on this book and this tour I've been doing and the conversations I've been having, a huge number of people do care about this.
They care about this because you push misinformation and you make it a bigger issue than it actually is, utilizing your leverage of attention, of clout, spreading misinformation as much as you can to make it a bigger issue than it actually is. There's a reason why Piers Morgan won't talk about wealth inequality. Because those billionaires won't put the money in his pocket if he does. Piers Morgan's a bot agent. I feel like we should be done with these bot agents, right, people? Piers Morgan showing a little bit of humanity every now and then. We're trying to call out this woman who was about to say the N-word on his platform, but even then, that wouldn't look good for the image unless he gets the clicks. I'm done with this. Piers Morgan debated. I will say he's a good debater. These people, they were not able to handle Pierce's way to control narratives and talking points, which I'm not surprised about because I watch all the time when he does this, or when I do have time to watch his shows, he constantly spins narratives to make a point that he cares about. So that is all we got. Hope you guys enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care. Peace.